Thanks so much for doing this, Kaelig.
Thank you for having me.
So the question I like to ask everybody is, how are you doing? As well as, is there anything that you're taking from this experience, like learning about yourself or about life?
Yeah, I think I've had ups and downs. I thought it was not gonna impact me too much, but it turns out those are not normal times. And even though I've been working remote for 2.5 years, I've got my nice office set up. I'm super lucky. We have a garden, and I can just get out and get some air, fresh air. But just the fact that friends and family are super far away is impacting, I think, everybody's mental health at the moment. So I'm learning to take care of myself and not expect the same level of productivity on day in, day out. Otherwise, it's just a straight road to burnout.
I get that for sure. I've realized I'm more introverted than I thought I was, because I've been okay sitting with myself and my cat, but I do miss, like, it's kind of nice to just go meet up at a bar, and can't really do that. So that's something
Cheers to
Kaelig
that.
would do a lot.
Yeah, we'll have to do something when this is all over.
Yeah. Well, I'll ask a couple questions to maybe get the ball rolling, and
Yeah.
for the attendees, use the Q&A to ask your questions. So I would like to hear about your role at Shopify, and how that might differ from your past roles that you've had, because you've had a lot of design system roles.
Yeah. So my role is changing right now, but for the past about 2 years, I was leading a tooling team as part of the design system team working on Polaris. For those who don't know what Polaris is, it's our design system at Shopify. Historically, it's been very back office, admin, Shopify focused. And right now we're trying to expand that to way more brand expressions. Shopify has been growing like crazy over the past 2.5 years, and it's been really good to see how the system has helped us to achieve what we wanted for the admin, but also it's got some limitations when it comes to expressing different bits and blobs of our brand. This is terrible lingo. This is not the proper designer lingo that I'm using. I'm mindful of that, but and so right now my role is changing from a manager to an IC, and so I'm what used to be called a lead front-end developer, and now it's called a staff UX developer. And it's been lots of design system related stuff, and the kind of stuff my team brought to Shopify is design tokens, an icon library that you could find at polarisicons.shopify.com. We helped rolling out Figma last year. We were championing that. Lots of fun. Obviously, the UI kit was a big part of that. So that's why we were tasked with that. And we've been looking a lot into prototyping tooling, and just in general making the path from a designer's idea to production a little bit smoother, hopefully.
I'm curious about, you said you went from lead front-end developer, and now you said senior UX developer. How would you describe the difference between a front-end developer and a UX developer?
So when I joined as a lead. I didn't have any reports, and front end was under one umbrella at Shopify. You know Jonathan Snook, but for those who don't know, he used to work at Shopify, and he's a front end expert who brought this whole discipline together at Shopify. So when I joined, I was part of this movement. And we were quite a few folks. both very technical and very UX focused at the same time. So that was like a big front end family. But at some point, we found that the people who were really interested in growing their skills in GraphQL, Node.js, understanding Webpack compilation steps might not be exactly the same growth trajectory for people who are more interested in animation, micro interaction, rendering performance, that kind of, or accessibility even. So there's the front of the front end, and there's then the back of the front end. And so we went from front end developers to two different roles: web developers who are more on the back of the front end, and UX developers who are more on the front of the front end. So I've always identified myself as kind of in between those two worlds, UX and engineering. And so I felt like this was the perfect place for me. And the big difference is, like I said, if you're a web developer, your engineering chops might be a little bit more what you're looking into growing into. And if you're a UX developer, it might be closer to the UX process. Maybe you're going to be closer to research even. You can be closer to, again, the front of the front end.
Cool. I also love that not even 5 minutes in, you already mentioned design tokens. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure that might be why some people joined the call today.
Yeah, so design tokens. They're a methodology that a certain Jina and a certain John came up with um, at Salesforce, and yeah, they're a way of expressing brand and many more design focused things at scale, across platforms, across environments. And I've had the chance to work at Salesforce, where this was put out at very large scale, and now I took it to Shopify, and on a slightly different path. We don't have the same use cases exactly, but I found out that this is a methodology that can scale to and adapt to any design system, any company. So yeah, don't know how deep I want to go on that first sentence, but
No worries. I'm sure we'll get more questions about it to go into specific areas, but we did get a question from James. He said, I'm a designer who codes, me too, and love building design systems in the front end. It's been challenging to position myself role-wise when working with new teams. How do you recommend people who bridge both worlds to position themselves as a designer who works in the front of the front end?
It's a good question. I feel like I would like to know more about the company and the UX culture there, the engineering culture. What is the path to production in general? Because that typically defines how you want to communicate about this role. In very engineering focused companies, that something might work, and in a very UX focused company, that same thing might not work. But generally, I can say how I've been talking about it. And I've been lucky to work in teams that were respecting UX quite a bit. But in the past, I've been at a company that was very engineering focused, and they had this giant gap between how engineers were thinking about design and how designers were thinking about design. And so they were looking for somebody to translate and to start creating communication conduits, I would say. And so, yeah, looking at where the communication kind of falls flat, and yeah, trying to jump in and see how people are referring to, for example, I mean, to go back to tokens, which I think is a great way to narrow that gap or just remove it, is if you look at how designers think about colors, and if you look at it in production, is that the same or is it totally different? And because you're a UX developer, you have a foot in both worlds, and you can look at making those people speak the same language. So basically, what it means for developers, and engineers love to hear that, is that um, uh, they have less QA at the end of the road, because they will implement something that's way closer to what the designers had in mind. So less back and forth with designers. Um, and so developer efficiency can be something you enable down the road. So I don't know how UX or engineering focused your company is, but feel free to ping me on Twitter, or my DMs are open if you want to talk more about this.
Yeah, I admit in my career, I've also struggled with this as well. Usually I find the managers and leaders that I've worked with always want to put me in a bucket. And I'm like, but can't I be in both buckets? And um, it was a struggle for most of my career, but I will say I have found design systems are like the perfect home for people like me, because I mean, you get to kind of be in both buckets.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I wanted to say something I can't remember now. Uh, yeah, no, I think this is where Shopify is really good, is that I'm both in the engineering leadership and the UX leadership channels on Slack. I'm invited to both kind of leadership meetings, and it really allows me to have a view in both worlds. And it turns out when I had the tooling team, two of my reports were the front end, so web developers, and one was a designer. And this is kind of rare that we have somebody who's not your discipline being your lead, but in that case, it totally made sense, and very cross-disciplinary. And then we had a part-time researcher, we had a content strategist who was joining project part-time, and so it's very like, I don't know. Can I swear? Okay. A big part of Shopify's culture is fuck the swim lanes. So you're not put into a little box and expected to just fit in there. And I love that, because for people like you and myself, it's a lot of opportunity for growth and impact.
I like that. Hey, Ehud. He said, great seeing us. Great seeing you too. Thanks for coming. And thanks for sharing your thoughts and knowledge here. Looking forward to getting drinks together at a future conference. Me too. So his question is, you've been pioneers and proponents of the design tokens practice for years. Has the practice changed at all during this time? And what are the key learnings across the journey to where we are today? What's still missing, and what's different between the approach at Lightning versus Shopify? That's a really good question. I'll let you take a stab
Yeah,
first.
so I feel like this is a Gina question, but I'll start, because on the front end, I think this has changed a lot. Um, a lot of people have stopped writing actual CSS or Sass even, and so with the growth of CSS and JS, using tokens across styles and application logic has become way easier. Like in React, you can have theme providers, and you can start thinking about colors in terms of variables and constants way faster and way earlier in the process if you use CSS and JS. And you don't even need any design token tooling at this point. It just comes for free with the stack. So I feel like it became way easier. The tools are so better on the design side. I mean, DSM obviously is one thing that enables that. And I don't know what the state of Abstract and Zeppelin is, but I know that when you look at the code view in some of those tools, you can see, instead of hex values, you see column names. I love that. And I don't know if it works for spacing, etc., but for color palettes, it does. So seeing that the tooling made it more approachable has changed the way people think about these things. Now at scale, going from Salesforce to Shopify has changed. There's a lot of different stuff. Especially when I joined 2 years ago, my goal was to add tokens to Shopify, and people not even knowing that it's there, just taking what exists and toolify it. And so I used Theo, which is something I worked a bit on, collaborated on at Salesforce. And I took my knowledge from Salesforce, applied it from the tool perspective. But I did not reinvent the way people were thinking about color at Shopify, because I thought it would be a huge change. But whereas at Salesforce, it's at the platform level. So people use tokens when they build apps. They use tokens when they build features. It's in the CSS. They have a custom CSS preprocessor, or live processor, even, because it's compiled on runtime. And yeah, there's a lot happening at Salesforce that Shopify so far has not needed, but we're getting there. We have merchants who need more brand expression in their admin and in their checkout and in their themes, and so we're starting to think a bit more at the platform level about tokens as well. But yeah, totally different use cases. Yeah, I just like that people are sharing the way they think about those things, because there's no one right way to do things. And the more open source projects there are, the more we can chat about that freely.
Are you scaling at all to native platforms?
Yeah, so at least for colors, it's the case. Yeah, and actually the rollout, tooling it, so having the tooling helped us figure out that not all colors were named exactly the same or had the exact same values across platforms. So that helped a bit to have more consistency across Android, React, Rails, and iOS. And we haven't looked too much into React Native, but that's going to be one of the next things we look at. But yeah, this is totally a Jina question, so I'm curious to hear what you think.
Well, I can't talk about the Lightning versus Shopify portion, so thanks for answering on that part. But yeah, I still use SaaS, and I probably will for a long time. But I think a lot of people that have kind of abandoned SaaS and maybe think design tokens aren't needed anymore are probably only thinking about the web space, and they probably are all in on one framework. And I think that's okay if that's your situation. Design tokens might not be for you, but they do solve a use case for scaling for other people that do have to take care of native or possibly multiple platforms, or even some of the other benefits you get, like if you're needing to do branding and customization and stuff like that. And so I think the use case is still there. But like, I don't think design tokens ever meant to be like the one-stop solution for everyone, but it is useful for many use cases. So I will say one of the issues I found when I was at Amazon, and I apologize if anyone from my team is watching this, but I'm just going to say it, but I found that when designers were delivering specs, they were building everything in JSS at the time. I don't know if they're still doing that now. And so things like the font, Amazon Ember, was defined like 32 times in the code base. It's the only font we use. But because it was in the spec, they rebuilt it in. And so it was this interesting balance of like keeping everything encapsulated, but maybe there are certain things that should cascade, because why are we declaring the same font 32 times? So it was just kind of an interesting dynamic between, trying to have something scalable, but also very encapsulated and modular. And I think that's a challenge a lot of people face with design systems. Like, how far in, the direction of modularity do you want to go, without like just having repetition everywhere. And I think there are some clever solutions out there that try to handle this, but my take is like, if you have a design token in your spec, then that's a clue that this thing already exists. So you probably don't need to re-declare it again. Whereas if it's a brand new spec, then maybe you're defining these are the new things that we need to add into the system. So I think design tokens kind of helped also at Salesforce for this very reason, because at the time when John Levine and I were refactoring, well, he was doing the refactoring. I was pairing with him remotely, like working with him on it. But, anytime there was a token for something, then you knew that it was a reference that already existed. So then there was like no like need to declare the font size again as a hard-coded value. I hope I'm making sense there. Let me see if I missed anything else in the question. Yeah, in terms of practices changing, I think a lot, and Kaelig kind of already touched on this, but a lot of it is getting integrated into our tools and workflows, where before, a lot of people still use tools like Theo and Style Dictionary, and those are still really wonderful tools. I see the community is moving towards, like, some people are going to be using just design tools to generate these. I don't think I've seen design tools yet encapsulate all that tokens can do. Like, I love that DSM has it, but at the time I used it, I think it was like color and typography. So there was still room for additional tokens that were needed, like spacing and all that. Maybe you have that now, I don't know. I'm talking to Ehud because he's the DSM guy to me. But yeah, I'm excited because I think more tools are going to adopt this. It's also why I'm excited about the community group, because I think it's going to lead to more people integrating this and making this kind of baked in. Do you want to touch on that part, the community group?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so the whole story. So I when I was in London, I worked at The Guardian, where I did a lot of work around getting the language the same between design and engineering. Things were going very fast, and there was no room for miscommunication. So breakpoints, colors, font sizes, font weights, all the styles that you see on theguardian.com needed to be codified in some way that spoke the language of designers and could go to code very quickly. I didn't really know the concept of tokens at the time. Also wasn't looking that much for something that would be cross-platform, because we had, for example, we had web views in the app anyway, so they would consume the same SaaS. Then I went to the Financial Times, and I had the need for the first time for something that was both in JSON and SAS, and we weren't sure how to go about it. So when I left, we didn't have any tooling around this. And then I came to Salesforce, and this is where I was like, oh, wow, okay, there's a lot of tooling around this here. It seems like it's part of the DNA of how people do design and engineering. Then I came to Shopify, implemented tokens again. And then in my first year, I started talking to a lot of designers inside of Shopify, outside of Shopify. And this is also when we started looking at prototyping tools such as Figma, Framer, UXPin, etc. Like the amount of churn to get our design language from one platform to the other feels like I'm redoing the same work over and over again, from company to company, from project to project. There must be a better way. Like this is crazy. I don't want to spend my life writing code that translates from one tool to another. And yeah, I had a particular chat at some point that ignited this need for getting everyone to sit around the table and be like, okay, can we come up with some sort of standard around how we codify tokens? Because yeah, there's a need out there. And I think a couple hours later, I started the W3C community group, started a discussion on GitHub to get people just started on how they think about tokens, what they think a spec should look like, and yeah, so far it's been good. Like I said, I wanted everyone around the table, not just tool makers like myself who are like internal to a company in a tooling team, but also tool makers who are, that's their job, that's what they do, like Adobe, InVision, Figma, Framer, etc. All the big players out there. And I'm obviously skipping a lot of names, but so sorry if you're watching and your tool wasn't mentioned. And then the token tooling makers, such as Style Dictionary, Theo, DS, and DSM is part of that as well, obviously. And so also consumers of those tokens, like what does that mean for them? And very quickly, Jina, you were brought on board. We are both the co-chairs of the token community group. What can I say? So far, the response has been pretty great. I was not expecting that many people to get so passionate about tokens and get on GitHub and detail, like doing technical documentation on how they think tokens should work. The tooling community has been also very receptive. So we have, like I said, like the Adobes of this world, and to only name the biggest one. We have some folks from Salesforce who have joined the community group as well. And now we have about 100 members from all these various companies. I'm also very excited about people from Google, for example, because they own part of the platform, and having them, they built Flutter, and they built a nice little browser called Chrome. It's like a little indie shop kind of browser. Don't know if you've heard of it. And so hearing from those kind of folks is awesome. And so the goal for this year, hopefully with human malware allowing us to still communicate and have discussions, the goal for this year would be to have some sort of base spec that a few tools would be at least playing with, maybe in beta, maybe actually in our products. And so we're talking to those folks, and we're going to have spec editors who are going to be drafting what the specification looks like. And so if you've ever come across a W3C spec, it's like a toned down version of this. We're not like that formal, but this is what it's going to look like in general. And there's another part of the community group which is going to be around education, which Jina, allow me to put you on the spot here, and maybe you can talk about education for design tokens.
Yeah, but I'll be brief because we're already at our 30-minute point. Yeah, so I feel like there's, in addition to a need for a standard, there's also a need to learn really like, how do I get started with this? How far into this should I get? How do I sell this to my organization? Like all that stuff. So I'm hoping that the documentation site that will one day be baked will have both of these, like the API part of it and like the standards, as well as some educational resources on how to even apply this. Yeah. So since we are at time, I just have a final question for you, Kaelig. Is there anything coming up for you that we can look out for, as well as ways the community can support you?
I mean, come and hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are open. Always love talking about career, UX development, anything related to that front end design frontier. And yeah, so at Kaelig, Kaelig on Twitter.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone that joined us. And I hope you have a good day.
Thank you so much.
Bye.